Hello, this is the Shadow Ranger back with my third video of today. Well, I'm just putting out videos this weekend. This is going to be my third one today, and I got lockdown picks and NWA Hollywood review for tomorrow, to do tomorrow. Alright. I got a question earlier this week, no, last week from Jay Hobson, and I want to try to answer it. It's taking me a while because I'm not sure how I want to answer this question, but he talked about, he mentioned me that, you know, there was these reports coming out over the past week about TNA wanting to rebrand their product to try to give it a very recognizable identity, and they even considered there's even been talk about maybe a name change to the company. He mentions that ratings have trended down with long-term and short-term, notably in the 18 and 34 male demographic. There's been talks about taking a new approach to the product to make it clearly different from WWE. And his question to me was, how would I rebrand TNA or give TNA a specific identity, or is the product fine as it is? As much as I like the product, I can't say that it's fine as it is. Ratings, pay-per-view buys, and ticket sales would suggest differently. Now, while part of that has to do with TNA's piss-poor advertising, part of that has to do with the product as a whole. So when rebranding TNA, it's a tough question, but giving it some thought, there's two things I think they need to do. They're gonna have to, like I said, you have to have the hardcore wrestling fans, and you have to have a drawing of the casual fans. But you kind of need to find a mix. You need to find a blend of something of stuff that will draw in the casual fan, but not turn off the hardcore fan. That has really been the issue. You know, with WWE doing this whole get rid of wrestling, move away from wrestling, you know, that's annoying some hardcore fans. And something I always thought would help if they did wrestling more traditional. Get back to just old school pro wrestling. I think there's a room for old school pro wrestling. There's room for the cartoony type characters from the past. There's room for gimmicks. There's room for just good storylines. Wrestling needs to get back to being that violent soap opera that it used to be. Also, you gotta look at different demographics. You know, I do think TNA should go PG. I've said in other videos that I think the attitude stuff is going to be a failure. You want to make your show accessible to all age groups. You need to make your show accessible to as many people as possible to bring in as many viewers as possible. I think they need to go into a PG era, or maybe a PG-13. I talked about it before. You can be PG and still appeal to older audiences. You don't have to have blood. You don't have to have ultra violence. You don't have to have half-naked women. You don't have to have a bunch of profanity. The example I've always given is any good superhero movie, any good superhero show is an example of how you can be PG and still appeal to older audiences. You know, any of the recent superhero movies, the Justice League animated series, Season 9 and 17 of Power Rangers. I talked about those too. That's Power Rangers Time Force and Power Rangers RPM. Watch those episodes. Those seasons aren't PG kitty. That's the blend I think TNA needs to find. Now, if I'm rebranding, rule one, we're going PG. We're going maybe a PG, PG-13. My writers would be made to watch teen dramas and superhero movies and superhero shows to get an idea that you can be PG and still appeal to older audiences. Trying to be kiddie isn't going to work because you're going to be directly competing with WWE. TNA doesn't need to get into that fight. Trying to be attitude and go for the adult male, the 18 to 30 crowd isn't gonna work because they're gonna be directly competing with UFC too much. They don't need to get in that fight either. You have to look at all other types of demographics. Who's not watching wrestling, and how can we get them? Do some things that appeal to teenage viewers. Teenagers are very loyal, you know, to things they like. Look at how you can appeal to women. You know, and back in the day, used to be a lot of women that were into wrestling. When I was a kid, a lot of girls like wrestling. You don't find many female wrestling fans anymore. What can you do in wrestling to appeal to women viewers? You know, do some research, do some focus groups, put some effort into finding who's watching wrestling and what do they like, who used to watch wrestling and isn't watching anymore, and figure out what could bring them back, who's not watching wrestling and what might get them to start. As far as talking about a name change, I think the TNA name's been around so long that it's kind of hard to change. You don't need to, but don't change it completely. If I was going to change the name of TNA, I would just drop the T and emphasize the W. The name of the company is Total Nonstop Action Wrestling. What they say for short is TNA Wrestling. I would just bring in the W and drop the T. I call it either, or just say all four letters. Either call it, say, TNAW or NAW, Nonstop Action Wrestling. Something that if you're going to make a change, you know, when WWF became WWE, they didn't change it completely. See, they can do the same. Become NAW, Nonstop Action Wrestling. Boy, J-Hop, this is a really hard question because I'm pretty much being asked to create a company. You know, I talked about that. You know, my company would be, you know, if I created a new promotion, it would be very centered on just North America. I wouldn't be trying to go for international. I'd be going for just national and local. You know, I wouldn't even have a world title in my company. My top title would be the American title. You know, my top belt would be called the American Heavyweight Championship. Then have like the American Television Championship, the American Tag Team titles, North America, not just USA. And then my other secondary belt, the American Women's Championship, and then my other secondary belt, I would call the United Heavyweight Championship. That would just represent more of the United States and not just the US and Mexico and Canada and stuff. But what do you think of that name, everybody, as the name of a belt? The United Heavyweight Championship. What do you think of that as a secondary belt? If you're going to try to set yourself apart from WWE, do so. If it's just about setting yourself apart from WWE, emphasize the things that they don't do. I've always said if TNA wants to really set themselves apart, you know, emphasize the X Division, even though I'm not a big X Division fan myself, because it is something they don't do. You know, WWE has maybe like Evan Bourne and Sin Cara doing a few flashy moves. Like, yeah, we got like 9 guys to do stuff like that. You know, if you want to set yourself apart, what don't they do, and do it. Emphasize the X Division. Emphasize that you have women who can actually wrestle and get tough. Put the women in more hardcore type matches, tables matches, steel cages and shit. WWE is going to put 2 divas in a steel cage. Go do that kind of stuff, you know. Emphasize your tag team division. Just get back to some old school wrestling. I think that everybody's trying to move forward when maybe the answer is to move backwards. I know a lot of fans are going to say, oh, rehashing the past. I'm not saying rehash the past. I'm not saying rehash old storylines. I'm saying bring back that old school philosophy. That everybody's always trying to find something new. I feel like they're kind of trying to reinvent the wheel a little bit. But don't rehash old storylines. Do new storylines with an old school mentality. You can do some old storylines with new people. That's another thing that can help. Get you a pass on it, you know. So to try to clear this up, I'm rebranding TNA. I don't think you need to change the name. I'd go PG. I'd advertise my product more. They're gonna need some additional programming or a shorter roster, and I would just have a more of an old school booking style, man. You know, I would get 2 old school guys, man. I'd get like Dutch Mantel, man. You know, cause I watched the Dutch Mantel shoot interview, the guest booker, and Dutch thinks a lot of the way that I think, man. And just, you know, I'd get rid of ambiguity. I would have very clear cut baby faces and clear cut heels again. None of that. So you pick a side and shit. And I'm gonna tell you, make one guy have him do nothing but despicable shit, and a babyface who does nothing wrong, man. I want you to be a guy that says, yeah, you talk about he screwed you over, and he says, "Yeah, I did, and I'll do it again," and you ain't gonna do shit about it. You know, just it's really hard to say how I would rebrand it, man. You know, there's changes I would make. You know, I trim the roster. I put more into advertisement. I send a lot of these legends out there to be ambassadors of the company. I'd adopt a more PG style of show. I want my show to appeal to as many different types of audiences as there can. You can't please everybody at once, but fucking take turns. You know? I don't think that answer is as good as it could be, but that's a really hard question for me to answer, though, J-Hop. But it was a good question, and thank you for sending it. So I'm gonna go ahead and end this video. But this is a topic I want to give some more thought to, and maybe try to plan out better. And once I'm able to really give it more thought and kind of get a good footing in it, I might come back and do a follow-up video to this one. But it's just more small things that I would change, you know. Alright. My thing is, try to appeal to as many different groups. You know, maybe you don't need to, you know, forget the 18 to 34-year-old male. Let's see if we can get some women to watch our show. Let's see if we can get teenagers to watch our show. Let's see if we can get some older audiences to watch, man. I think it's time to find a brand new audience. WWE has the little kid market cornered. UFC has the 18 to 34-year-old male market cornered. TNA, find somebody new. I mean, if I'd seriously consider marketing my product to women more. I really would. You got wrestlers, they're big, muscular men. I do more photo shoots with the men, like some. Just had a guy, you know, fucking put fortune out there in no shirts and tight jeans. Women will get into that. Some good looking shirtless guys, you know. Make it more of a soap opera aspect. Emphasize the storylines more. Women like soap operas and things like that, and you know, soap operas been getting canceled for a while, so maybe a good one will bring some people back. You know, portray your male wrestlers as tough guys. Portray them as having some sensitivity to them, man. Portray them as being family man, as being romantic, as being some of them as being the romantic guys. Portray some as the leather jacket wearing bad boys. Portray them as beefcakes and stuff, man. You know, I think that's a market that wrestling has lost. That a lot of women used to be really into wrestling, and they're not anymore. And that's a market they've lost, and you could look into trying to get back. Look into maybe teenagers. You know, I like wrestling when I was a teenager. Maybe you can get teenagers back into wrestling again. Look for new demographics. Look at who ain't watching wrestling. How can we get them to watch? Alright, that's where I'm going to end for now. I will probably revisit this topic at a later date. This is the Shadow Ranger. Thank you for listening. Have a nice day.